This lecture is on the coordinate plane. So in order to draw graphs, we need a pair of number lines which will measure the size of the two quantities that we're relating. We often call these the axes. We usually name them the x and the y axes, at least when we're doing mathematics, but in some contexts, of course, they could represent particular things like the age and the height that I talked about in the previous lecture. Now, once you've got the axes, then you can identify any point in the plane by a pair of numbers, a pair of coordinates, which measure its horizontal position and its vertical position. So, for example, the pair 3, 2 is the point which sits above the 3 mark on the horizontal axis and level with the 2 mark on the vertical axis. In the same way, the point 1, 1 sits above the 1 mark on the x-axis, but opposite the 1 mark on the y-axis. We should remember that the points in the plane don't always have coordinates which are whole numbers, that there are also fractions allowed, or numbers like the square root of 2. Any number is allowed for either coordinate, and it's tempting sometimes to forget that and think that we always have whole numbers, but that's definitely not the case. There's a special point in the plane called the origin, and that's the point whose coordinates are 0, 0. So this is the point where the axes meet. It lies on both the axes, and we think of it as kind of the center of the plane from which we sort of measure positive distances and negative distances. And then also, as I said, any number can be used, and that of course includes negative numbers as well. So either or both of the coordinates could be negative. And this choice of whether the coordinates are positive or negative corresponds to the fact that the axes divide the plane into 4 parts. I mean, it's obvious that 2 axes do divide the plane into 4 parts, but we now of course see that the top right-hand part is the part where both coordinates are positive. The top left-hand part is the part where the first coordinate is negative and the second one positive, so that's to the left of the origin but above it. The bottom left part is that where both coordinates are negative, and then the bottom right part where the first coordinate is positive but the second coordinate is negative. Now, these 4 parts are often called quadrants. So the prefix quad is familiar to you in words where the number 4 is involved. For example, a quad bike has 4 wheels. And so we call these quadrants because there are 4 of them. And it's sometimes convenient to have names or numbers for these quadrants if we want to refer to them, the first, second, third, and fourth quadrant. And we number them anti-clockwise around the origin. So the first quadrant is the one where both coordinates are positive, the second where the first coordinate is negative but the second is positive, and so on anti-clockwise around the origin. We get back to the fourth coordinate, and then if we imagine continuing, we would then return to the first coordinate. So sometimes it's useful to have these names, although not all the time. So to summarize this introductory lecture, the plane has 2 axes, which we use to measure the quantities that we're trying to compare or relate. Each point in the plane can be specified by a pair of numbers. The first coordinate tells you the horizontal position of the point, and the second coordinate tells you the vertical position of the point. And we must remember that we can have negative numbers or fractions as the coordinates. Now, in the next lecture, I'm going to introduce straight lines, which we'll be plotting on the coordinate plane.